saves them, I think, and Bezos is trying to trap this is people like me that wait until their printer says no more ink, and they need a place to go fast.
Sure. Guess they thought it would be one. Welcome to the February 20th meeting of the Mobile City Planning Commission. I would like to take a moment to review our general operating procedures. Our meeting is divided into two sessions, the public hearing session and deliberation session. In the public hearing session, an application or group application on the agenda is called. The applicant makes his or her presentation. Commission members ask questions, if any. Members of the public make their comments. Only 4 people may speak for an agenda item, project, and 4 against. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commission. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate 1 minute left to speak, and at this point, please summarize your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, the applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium, speak into the microphone, and give your name and address for our minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission only and not to the applicant or the audience, and please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, the applicant may simply raise his or her hand if there are no objections to staff recommendations. I will then announce that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are any questions, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all applications, the commission will go into deliberation session. The commissioners discuss each application with input from the staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. The commissioners then vote on each application, and the results of voting can be learned from the planning department. If some issue arises in the deliberation session that were not addressed in the public hearing, the chairman has the discretion either to allow additional comments pertaining to those issues in order to resolve them, or call for the application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, one or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voting on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, the supernumerary will vote in their stead unless both supernumeraries are already voting due to absences. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, planned unit developments, PUDs. The Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decision. Please silence or mute all cell phones at this time. Commissioners and staff, please remember to turn on your microphone when speaking. Roll call. Myself, Ms. Libby Latham. Ms. Jennifer Denson. Ms. Shirley Sessions. Mr. Alan Cameron. Mr. Taylor Atchison.
Here.
Mr. Matt Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Nick Umberger.
Here.
Ms. Bess Rich. Mr. Don Hembry. Mr. Clark Blackwell. Mr. Jay Stubbs. Mr. Bill Goodlow. We have a quorum. Beginning with our holdovers, item number 1, 7960 Old Government Street. The subdivision is recommended for approval with the PUD recommended for denial. Is the applicant present? Do you have any?
Okay, I'm here.
Do you have any questions or comments concerning staff recommendations?
Well, to be honest with you, some of this is a little Greek to me, reading some of it, some of the comments, but I understand some of them, so I'm not really sure what,
Okay.
how to comment on it, to be truthful.
Okay. Well, your first portion of it, the subdivision portion of your application, is being recommended for approval. However, your PUD portion, planned unit development, is being recommended for denial. And I guess for various reasons. Have you had a time to take a look at those reasons?
Yeah, I mean, I see the reasons, but I'm not really sure how to comment on them. If you want to give me a sample or tell me what you're looking for, then, you know, maybe we can accommodate.
You want me to pick it up? Okay. PUD, planned unit developments, are site plan specific. As submitted, the site plan is still deficient. There's gated access to glider, and it still does not provide for adequate queuing space. The driveway width for two-way traffic has to be 24 feet wide for the entire duration of the property. You have a tree by one of the, yes, the circle, thank you. You have a tree proposed to be saved right here. However, there is no accommodation for it to be able to survive. It's covered by parking, by driveway, and then by building. If it's going to be removed, it needs to be marked for removal. But the driveway width has to be 24 feet in width for the entire length of the property. Glider, I believe it was, required dedication. Once the dedication is provided, you still need to provide the queuing space from the gate to the right-of-way, and you still need to provide the adequate landscaping percentage for the frontage between the building and the street. Does that cover everything? Yes, the gate needs to be 60 feet back to allow for a large RV or for a truck and the RV behind it. You can't have the RV sitting in the right-of-way while the gate's being opened.
Okay. Well, as a comment to that, glider was actually meant just to be an exit. I mean, we can either take it or do away with it. It's not an end-all, end-all. We did the 60-foot on the old government side that y'all asked for last time, but this is the first I'm hearing about the glider side. As far as the tree goes, you know, we were just trying to accommodate and give you the tree that is one of the older trees. If it needs to be removed, I'm in. Let's move it and put some other trees up. I'm good with that. I mean, I'll work with you. Just tell me what you want me to do, and we'll make it happen.
Well, we always like to see trees preserved when possible,
Okay.
but as designed, it will never survive.
Okay, I understand. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I did. Yes, sir. Jason with ACAD Development.
Could you turn your microphone on? It's not,
Oh, other button, there we go. Normally, the engineers know the requirements to, to put in the PUD, so they pass the requirements that the commission has, so.
I see. Okay.
I mean, these are all nothing significant, but I think if you had a good engineer that could address these items, you might have better luck next time you come in.
Okay, well, that's fine. We'll just readdress them and move forward next time. Is that okay?
is it possible? Is it possible to hold this over again?
The commission may choose to hold it over. However, it would need to be held over until the second meeting in March because of trying to get a revised plan, next week being a short week, et cetera. But that revised plan needs to address these issues.
What's the date on the second week in March?
March 19th.
19th. And with
Yes, sir.
revisions due by what date?
Oh, goodness, give me a moment. March 5th. March 6th. I would say by March 6th, that gives 2 weeks.
Okay. That it?
Yes, sir. So if you could have your engineer address these comments and get it turned into the city
Okay.
by the March 6th, I believe, then it'll come up for agenda on the second meeting in March, and we'll be able to hopefully get it approved.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Is there anybody else here to speak for or against this? Thank you. New subdivision applications. Item number 2, 4201 Stratford Court and 4212 Moffett Road, Francia and Gardner subdivision. Recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement? Applicant is present and in agreement with staff recommendations. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 3, 259, 261, and 263 North Dearborn Street, Dearborn Place subdivision. Recommended for approval. Is the applicant present?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Stevens with representing Historic Mobile LLC, which is a land bank that we've created to acquire land and get houses built downtown. I think we were fine with everything except for the engineering comment B, requiring a 15-foot minimum radius. And I don't know how that should be worded, but we've asked for 5-foot radius to be allowed.
Any comments for engineer?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of that. About what radius were you requesting?
State and Dearborn
Mm-hmm.
would be the northwest corner of that intersection. One of the lots is on that corner, and the engineering comment requires a 15-foot minimum radius, and we believe that's inappropriate in this context, and would like for allowed 5-foot radius.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
we're
Yes.
typically not changing radiuses downtown, so we wouldn't have an objection to it being left alone as it is. If you wanted it smaller, which I think that's what may have been, I think we need to look at that and talk about that with traffic engineering. Reducing the radiuses to a certain point, are good. It is good for traffic. It slows things down. But if you get them too small, then vehicles trying to make the turns can't successfully navigate them. It can tear up the concrete infrastructure that's there. So I
I
think we
did
just
talk
leave-
to Jennifer yesterday, and she said, without my saying it, said 5 feet would be appropriate there.
Yeah, I think if we can leave the note, as it is, as required by the city engineer and traffic engineer, we can
We
work
would
through
object
whatever.
to leaving the note as it is,
Yeah, okay, great.
and would ask that you not do that.
And just a general statement for the staff, if we can, I mean, we have this challenge every time in downtown. We're typically not changing those radiuses down there, but I think if we can talk about it, make sure you get with either myself or Jennifer, both of us simultaneously, and discuss that, we can avoid this in future comments.
So are you saying that it is okay to do the smaller radius and you want to leave the comment as is? Or are you asking that
I think if we just leave the note like it is now, we can look at it. I mean, the plans that I have don't say what the radius is. The radius might already be 15 feet. It might be something less than 15 feet. I don't know. I'd like to see what they are, and then I'm understanding that you'd like to see a 5-foot radius and see how much smaller that makes it relative to all the pieces and parts that would be there, sidewalks and everything. The city's main interest is that everything can fit within the right-of-way that should be on the right-of-way, and then not get torn up because something's too small that vehicles can get on top of it. As long as we can accommodate that, I think everybody will be satisfied.
Right, but the difference is that this 15-foot minimum would be on the deed, and so that's
But it says or as
certainly a
approved,
concern.
or as approved by city engineer.
Well, or as
so.
approved, but,
Chairman,
that leaves a lot of,
We can take, I'm okay with taking the 15-foot minimum and just leaving it as approved by the city engineer or traffic engineer. I think that'll satisfy everybody, hopefully.
15-foot maximum,
Pardon
or
me?
as approved.
You got to put the details in. I mean, if, I don't know what it is unless I get a survey of the actual radius. So if I just see a rounded picture, I know generally downtown, the radiuses can vary between 2 feet to 25 feet. So it just depends. And 2 feet
Well, as I
typically does
said,
not
when I was
work.
talking to Jennifer White yesterday, she agreed at the 5, but I didn't.
Well,
But it is a greater issue. The 15-foot minimum is the language that is put in every one of these things in all the downtown and historic districts. And, it just shouldn't be in there to be 15-foot minimum.
yeah,
If you
that's
want,
fine.
as approved by city engineer and traffic engineer, and we do a track record of allowing it to stay as it is or smaller radiuses in these urban areas, I'm good with that. But I agree with the applicant that the 15-foot minimum shouldn't be just thrown in there every time, including as well as the 25-foot setbacks we always deal with in historic overlays
Yeah.
and things of that nature.
Yeah, and typically our minimum radius is 25 feet.
That's right.
In this instance, since it is downtown, and I looked at, that we didn't have buildings there and everything, I lowered it to a 15-foot to try and accommodate that. So I think what Nick is saying is the note covers whatever the city engineer and traffic engineer agree to, and it being downtown, it can be accommodated for different circumstances. So it really doesn't matter whether we say 15-foot maximum, 25-foot maximum, as long as it says as approved by city engineer and traffic engineer, they can agree to 2-foot or whatever, but there's really not a good minimum to put or a max.
I disagree a little bit in that, because if you didn't have an applicant that paid attention to the details of this, it goes to the civil engineer and then to the builder, and they build the 15 feet as it's put in the document without any regard. And I don't think y'all are just looking at them after this and saying maybe it should be a 10-foot radius, are you?
No.
So it's just going to get built as a 15-foot radius if the applicant isn't on their toes in addressing this, which is,
Well, let me address that. The applicant should be on their toes.
Well,
People should be reading the comments, and I think that's exactly,
going to build it like it's written.
I think that's
Nice for them to
exactly
listen
what Ms. Stevens is doing. She's reading the comments, which that's exactly what we want people to do. As far as vehicular traffic making radiuses, the bigger the radius, the smoother it is for vehicular traffic. However, we recognize this is a downtown area, and it's intended to support, heavy walking traffic. If we had a scenario that the adjacent property owner maybe was a trucking company or something that was going to have a large vehicle making right turns on a regular basis there, we would probably want to keep a bigger radius there, or as big as it could be, to accommodate the vehicle that would make the turn and not let them jump that curb and subsequently tear up the sidewalks and ADA ramp. So, every one of these things really kind of stands on its own merit depending on what's there. The city fully recognizes and wants them to be as small as they possibly can. So I think if we can just leave that note like it is, and if there's no reason to change it, then we don't change it. If there is a reason to change it, we can.
Well, I think that the reason is that that there's ample writing about how inappropriate more than 15 feet is in an urban setting. And so, in particular, this setting, which is a little neighborhood and a school. And so I think there is a good reason to not just leave it as the standard and to do something special in this case.
Well, and that's precisely what this note does, and the interaction back and forth between the applicant, the engineer, and the city departments that review that. I mean, we want to give you what you want, but everything's got to fit together. Oftentimes, these streets are not in the center of the right-of-way. Sometimes the right-of-way is not a standard 50 feet, so there has to be some flexibility to try to adjust to make all the pieces and parts coexist together. And I get that the notes, and I agree with Mr. Atchison that, we should work this out really before it gets to this body. So when any applicants come downtown, I know you're generally aware of anything that's coming downtown. If there's a concern, try to bring that to us and to the respective departments earlier, and we'll make the adjustments accordingly before they get on the comments here.
Nick, what would be the problem with just having it to read, dedicate the corner radius as approved by the city engineer, and take the 15-foot minimum out? I mean, because you still have to approve it at that rate, correct?
Yeah, we just want to look at it and make sure that the pieces and parts fit without having a real survey that shows where the existing road is, relative to the property lines, and what the existing radius is, actually of the street. We just can't tell. We've got to see that. And I know a lot of times the Planning Commission applications are not, they're not survey grade surveys. So we've got to have some flexibility, or either we have to have real detailed drawings to start with. Either way, I think we can work through it and get to an acceptable solution. I prefer that it be done on the front end so that we don't have to have these comments before everybody.
Right.
And we recognize that we want to keep the traffic as slow as it can be downtown, but we also have to recognize we don't want vehicular traffic driving up and over the curb ramps and the ADA ramps that get built in these situations too. And there's got to be a delicate balance, and there's not just one radius that fits every particular scenario.
And I think the concern is that you won't always be there, or the folks that kind of are willing to work. And so this language gets stuck on the deed, and it sits there, or plat, or whatever the terminology is, and it sits there, and as the owner, we don't know what the outcome's going to be, but we know what the research is, that it should not be more than 15 feet in an environment like this. In fact, it should be considerably less. So asking for it to be a maximum of 15 seems reasonable.
Well,
And to give the developer some assurance that there won't be an unreasonable scenario down the line. I think that's all we're asking.
Well, I think we're happy to discuss how these notes are go any further. I think we've got, in this particular case, the situation satisfied. Again, has to be flexibility, or you're going to have to provide very, very specific drawings that are survey grade at the time of these applications. I mean, and it's one or the other. There's really nothing in between. Again, we all want the exact same thing. And I think if we just leave it as approved by city engineer and traffic engineer, I think you'll be satisfied.
Okay. Well, again, I would ask that the 15-foot minimum be changed to maximum. And I thank you. Any more questions?
Any more questions by commissioners? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. New sidewalk waiver applications, item number 4, 4281 Alden Drive, Dalton Holdings. Request to waive the sidewalk is recommended for approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendation? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. New rezoning application. Item number 5, 1500 Government Street, Casey Pipes. Is recommended for denial of the zoning change. Is the applicant present?
Hello, Casey Pipes, 2255 Ashland Place for the applicant. This is in on a rezoning from LB2 to B2. This is the shopping center at Government and Catherine Street behind the Starbucks where there's an Office Depot, Dollar Store, Dollar Tree. We have here a change in conditions and a manifest error that we think justifies the rezoning. It's primarily evidenced by the fact that this shopping center exists and has for some time, 17 years now. We have 3 suites in this existing space that have been vacant for over 3 years. 2 of these suites would be filled by this rezoning request, which is to allow a state-run ABC store in there. But the 2 bigger tenants, the Office Depot and Dollar Tree, Office Depot gave notice of non-renewal last summer that they were leaving, and they had to be talked into staying. And if you know what a landlord has to do to talk a tenant into staying in property they've already said they're leaving, it's cut the rent. Dollar Tree got a rent cut too. And it's in this area where we've got to have some viable tenant that comes in there that provides some additional support for this subdivision, for this shopping center. And we think that the site is struggling, in part, not wholly, but in part because of the LB2 zoning, which limits some uses down. There's a lot of B2 surrounding it at the corner, across Catherine where the Winn-Dixie is, across Government where there's some buildings fronting on the street that are all B2. And so we think the change in use and the manifest error is that we can't get viable tenants to come in there and support this center. And the reason they had to cut rent is they couldn't find another tenant that was willing to come into that existing space for Office Depot. Also, I think this change in conditions manifest error is shown by the future land use plan of the city itself. This whole area, this LB2 area and the B2 area that surrounds it is all going to be merged into one new zoning district under the current future land use plan, NCT. It's not going to be a lesser zoning criteria for this property. It's going to be the same as the shopping center around it. And in that proposed zoning, a liquor store would have been allowed by right. And I understand that's not the law we have today, but it's certainly not a ding on this application. There's also a third justification, an increased need for sites. The way the zoning code reads now, this liquor store would have to be put right on Government Street on one of those B2 parcels. And we've been told that there will be a state ABC store on Government Street somewhere in this area. And there's a lot of B2 available for it to come in, which wouldn't require any approval from y'all, just sort of a tenant build-out permit from the city. We think putting a store back in the shopping center off the street is a better solution than forcing it to be right up on the street. I know the one that comes first in my mind is that Dolphin and Broad Street, liquor store that's kind of right on the road. But if you put one back in a shopping center where this is, it gets it a little bit further away. Now, in comments and communications that the developer and realtors for this area have had with the community organizations, they would prefer for this to stay as LB2, but get a waiver or a variance or get some other way to allow the liquor store to be in there. And I'm not trying to speak for everybody in that regard, but we've listened to that request. We are willing to ask that this application be held over so we can run down the parallel path of seeing if the Board of Adjustment would give us that variance to allow a liquor store in the LB2 zone there, particularly if we have neighborhood support for that. And we think we can make that next zoning board agenda filing date, which is March 3rd. So, any questions?
Okay, so with that variance by the Board of Adjustment, that would accomplish what the applicant is trying to accomplish.
The applicant is interested, they've got a potential lease to the state ABC board for 2 of these suites, which were a former check cashing thing. We're fine with leaving it LB2 and getting the variance. We asked for B2 and then eliminated through voluntary use restrictions all of the B2 uses that aren't parallel with the LB2 uses except the state store. We're really just trying to accommodate this one potential tenant, which would take up 2 of the middle suites in this section and provide a good tenant that's not vulnerable to a lot of the other things that are affecting retail right now.
And based on the comments that we were reading, there was extensive comments that were provided. It seems like, for the most part, the residents are in agreement with that plan and with that path of having a variance and keep it LB2.
That was our understanding as well in our read of it. And we frankly thought it was a better candidate for a rezoning, but with a mountain of voluntary use restrictions, than it was a candidate for a variance. But we are more than happy to work with, the neighborhood organizations and community groups that have spoken on this, and it accomplishes the exact same thing from our perspective.
As long as the Board of Adjustment gives you the variance.
We're fine to ask for it and pursue it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we hope we get it, but obviously we haven't even
hold
applied.
this over until the next meeting to give yourself time to go to the Board of Adjustment?
The April 6th Board of Adjustments meeting would be the one that we would land on if we get our application in by March the 3rd.
So what meeting would that be?
I think that puts you on the April 16th meeting.
That's correct.
Okay, so hold over to April 16th.
I have a question for staff. On this property, what would be the oversight on the exterior of this build-out? I've seen some comments from neighbors, obviously not looking for the burglar bar, kind of rough exterior that some ABC stores have. Is this something governed by the ARB, or is it outside of a historic district?
Pardon? Yeah. See this line, see the line going through?
That lower bell?
That's the historic district line.
Down the center?
But I believe historic district regulations, if the line cuts a piece of property, the entire property is under their purview.
So if that's the case, then all these concerns about architectural appeal and so forth, that's addressed in that Historic Society requirements.
Correct. The review board would have to approve any exterior modifications to the building.
Okay.
And that's whether it's rezoned. That's whether it's rezoned or gets an adjustment, right?
Correct. It doesn't matter what triggers the alterations to the exterior of the building. Any alterations require review board approval.
Okay.
Any other questions by commissioners?
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against?
Good afternoon. I'm Brenda Bolton. I live at 310 West Street in Fauclair. And I'm here to speak against the application as it's submitted, but I'll say in my remarks that I'm for the variance. I join neighbors in Old Dolphin Way, LHDNO, Church Street East, and the Dexter Street Association. They've all signed on to, their boards have signed on to supporting a variance for this ABC store, provided the zoning is left at limited B2. Despite what may be coming with the UDC, we're dealing with the facts as they are today, and that's what neighbors have asked for. And the developer and their representatives, the owner, they've all been, Mr. Pipes, they've all been gracious. They reached out to us first. They met with us. They've addressed some of our, maintenance and general concerns. They've made some commitments to other concerns that neighbors expressed. So we see it as an opportunity to improve that corner. As I said in our remarks, we didn't want that strip mall. And I was living in the area when it went in, and I was part of that fight against it. But we have it now, and it's a reality. And we don't think it's the current owner's fault that it was approved, and we want to work with them to support it and help him stabilize it, because we realize that shopping centers are in a retail crisis in this country, across the country. We don't want a vacant building in our midst. That's 5 acres. Across the street is another 5 acres at Winn-Dixie that continues to worry us. We don't want 10 acres there vacant and sliding into being a big blighted property. So we want to help him get good tenants in that are long-term tenants that are stable, and, a state agency, ABC store, would certainly fill those requirements. The ABC representatives came down and met with neighbors. They presented a good case, and I think they'll be good neighbors for us. They gave us contact numbers if we have problems, so we're encouraged that this can be a positive resolution to what, could be a brawl under other circumstances. So we think we found a solution, and we hope you will agree with us. We do understand that a use variance is required to address a hardship that's not related to the applicant's economic success. And the hardship in this case is absolutely a shared one between the community and the owner, because this is 5 acres in our midst. We need a good working relationship with this owner. And, we envision improvements. We want to support him if he will consider any of those improvements. And I think if we can't craft this compromise and get it passed, then this can become a destructive element in our working relationship. And I don't think that's good for any party, and it's not good for the city. So I hope we can do this. I ask you to carry over the case as they've requested so that they can apply for a variance with the Board of Adjustment, and we'll be prepared to make our case before the Board of Adjustment. Do we have any questions?
I do have one comment. I am very thankful that y'all were also agreeable to work together, and that you've worked hard to come up with what you think is a nice, workable solution for you. Thank you to the owner and the developer and to the community surrounding. We appreciate it when people get together beforehand.
Okay. Well, kudos to the owner, to Mr. Vallis, to Mr. Pipes. We've done this on a couple of other developments on Government Street in the last year and a half. We've been successful. And, I think it's good for everybody when we can find compromises and come to you smiling.
Well, I think y'all's cooperation is appreciated.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak against?
Teresa Tessner from 272 Park Terrace in the Linecoff District. First, I would like to open my remarks by saying that the neighbors greatly appreciate that Councilman Manzi recommended the developer meet with neighborhood groups, and that the developer did so and worked to address neighbor concerns about this project. Developing appropriately scaled commercial use that respects and maintains the fabric of historic districts is especially complicated where long-standing residential use exists alongside commercial use, often developed in a piecework way over tens of decades. This type of timeline means the existing zoning and development of a parcel may reflect now outdated planning goals and be subject to economic conditions that need to be addressed in unique and creative ways. The zoning change request to upzone the Shops of Midtown at 1500 Government Street from LB2 to B2 caused considerable concern amongst the surrounding neighborhoods. The applicant then amended the original filing to include a list of voluntary use exclusions to the application such that the zoning change would effectively equate to LB2 uses plus a state-operated package or ABC store. The Shops of Midtown owner-management rep, Mr. McCullough, the realtor developer, Mr. Vallis, and ABC representatives met with neighborhood representatives regarding the neighborhood's concerns about the proposed zoning change for the operation of the ABC store. At that time, the developer side representatives agreed to a commitment written into the record for exterior features consistent with the Architectural Review Board standards for historic districts, appropriate door canopies, no digital signage, low-impact signage, and strict adherence to the city sign ordinance as to temporary window signage and the allowed percentage of window coverage standard. Mr. Vallis made a note that the project description would include the above, as well as no riot-style, bar-style, or garage door-style security gates be used on the exterior storefront. Mr. McCullough agreed. Neighborhood representatives wanted assurance stated in the application that no waiver to add curb cuts would be needed. Mr. McCullough agreed. ABC store reps described the proposed store as an ABC Select branded store and agreed to limited hours of operation, similar to those of the McGowan Park and Ashland Place ABC stores. Mr. McCullough agreed to employ on-site security if issues with loitering or panhandling were to develop. These commitments, combined with the operational policies, design guidelines, and 10-year lease of the ABC Select stores, will limit the potential negative impact of this type of store to that of any comparably sized specialty store now allowed in LB2 zoning. Therefore, neighbors request that the LB2 zoning remain, but with a use variance to allow a 3,400 square foot state-operated package store, including all of the above agreed upon conditions at the Shops of Midtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions by commissioners? Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else here to speak against?
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Bush. I live at 21 Bienville Avenue, and I'm on the board of Old Dolphin Way. And I too am here in the same spirit as Ms. Bolton and Ms. Tessner. We think this is a great tenant. Nothing brings Mobile together like booze. I think we're ready to move forward with this, but we recognize what we're up against in terms of if this property were, for example, to go to B2, and particularly with the retail decline, there are a tremendous number of homes around it that would be impacted very directly, much more so than some of the other properties in the area. So upzoning this whole property is not a good thing. But what we certainly don't want to see is this property go dark, because that would be the absolute death of some of this area. So we are, asking the owners to continue to act in good faith as they have, and to help with some of the quality of life issues that people have, complaints about dumpsters and trash and that sort. And it sounds like they're very much on board with that. Driveway, trash. At the meeting that we had, the ABC folks did comment that they don't want to get in the middle of a neighborhood fight. And we don't want them in the middle of a neighborhood fight either. We don't want the tenant to get discouraged by an acrimonious resubmission and tug of war. So we very much think the course of the waiver, and I'm real happy that Mr. Pipes is going to do that. The property already has some LB2 restrictions, so we don't want to go to a situation where we have a B2 with restrictions and maybe lose some of those LB2 restrictions in the wash. So I just wanted to Again, we believe ABC will be a great tenant. We know that it'll have limited hours. We know they will have no hesitation to call law enforcement if the situation requires it. We do ask that we move forward as quickly and smoothly as possible with this waiver path, and hope that the staff will recommend that for approval as soon as it goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions by commissioners? Is there anyone else here to speak against? Thank you. The applicant has an opportunity to respond. That closes our public session, and we'll now go into deliberation. Item number 1, 7960 Old Government. It's recommended for holdover till the March 19th meeting. I'll make that motion. Second. Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Be held over to March 19th meeting. New subdivision applications. Item number 2, 4201 Stratford Court and 4212 Moffett Road. It's recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 3, 259, 261, 263 North Dearborn Street. It's recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve, subject to staff recommendation, modifying Note 7, B, eliminating the 15-foot minimum from the note.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Could you, Nick, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you were saying. Are we leaving the 15-foot minimum in there?
No, we're going to
Taking it out?
that
Okay, all right.
Just
Real quick discussion. We don't want to sit in here and discuss engineering comments all day, but to the applicant's point, and sitting here talking with Nick about it, maximum is something we should consider in the language moving forward, because in our downtown, 15 is probably the max it should be. 25 and higher is for a use of a much more industrial use. We've got a really large city, trucking companies, moving companies, things that would need that type of use. If we decide they need to be in downtown, then they should go through the process of coming in here and asking for more radius, and not us asking for less on something that we do want in an urban walkable core. So I'm good with how this is going and removing the 15-foot minimum, but I'd like to consider in the future changing that to a maximum in the downtown area.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. New sidewalk waiver applications. Item number 4, 4281 Alden Drive, Dalton Holdings. The waiver is recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the sidewalk waiver?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. New rezoning application, 1500 Government. Applicant is requested holdover till April 16th. I'll make the motion.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item will be held over till our April 16th meeting. Thank you. Is there any other business? We have approval of minutes of the January 9th application for Cabana Royale. I think they're on our desk. Staff, any comments?
That's correct. That is just the minutes for that specific application. As you may recall, that application has been appealed to the City Council. The hearing is next Wednesday, and they had asked if possible for there to be approved minutes for that meeting, so you have it just for that application.
Move to approve the minutes.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor for approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. And that concludes this meeting. Thank you.
drive, Mr. Allen.